Let's take a look at the Motu 828 Mark III. It's both a USB and FireWire 800 audio interface. Lots of ins and outs, plug a mic in, whatever. I'm not going to read the spec sheet to you guys because you can definitely do that for your own on their website. So let's go check it out. So why do I install an extra audio interface? I mean, your video I/O card does that. Well, most, Matrox RIP, they're not really making or supporting their interfaces anymore. If you want to do more than stereo output, 5.1, either you can get into SDI de-embedders and a lot of crazy adapters and stuff, or you can just get a USB, FireWire, Thunderbolt external audio interface and add that on. Now, of course, one of the things you'd expect is better sound quality, and I will say, for the most part, yes, that is true. With an external audio interface, you should be getting much better A to D and D to A converters. Originally, I was using this with a set of KRK Rocket 6s, Model 2s, and with that, it sounded okay. Once I upgraded to some Dyna audio speakers, the limitations in the Motu hardware started to become apparent. The mid-range was just kind of muddy. The old KRK speakers tended to just smear the bottom end and even into the lower mid-range, while the Dyna audios give really precise audio response. They have very quick defined bass response, and I really started to give up the shortcomings of this interface. So long story short, no, I'm not terribly impressed with the audio quality of the 828 Mark III. Yes, it's 96K, and that's what I was running it at, 24-bit of course, and yeah, it was okay, you know. It is a little bit cleaner than 48K, but not by much, and you might as well just save the drive space and use 48K to begin with. One of the nice things about this interface is that it's got dual optical inputs, so you can theoretically add other stuff on. The problem that I had with it was getting it to lock with the AES coaxial input. Even when I fed it on the second optical input, I was feeding the digital output of my Mac Tower in. I had a lot of cracking and popping, and what that really comes down to is clock locking problems. I'm going to spare you a lot of debugging stuff, but basically the Motu seems sloppy, loose, finicky, whatever, but it doesn't like to really lock up to other devices as well as I would have expected. Not nearly as good as the Tascam that I had tied to it, but that's going to be for another day. So the overall audio quality of the Motu is better than what's built into the computer, but I wouldn't call it spectacular, particularly if you've got really good speakers in your system that can really reveal flaws in audio. Next, let's talk about the drivers, because the drivers are the other half of the equation. Regardless of how good or bad the interface sounds, the software has to play nice, and I'm just going to come straight out and say it. The Motu drivers suck. There's no other two ways around it. They're finicky, they crash on startup, they have a control panel that takes forever to load. If you unplug the unit, plug it back in, things go haywire, as compared to some other USB interfaces where if you say shut the power off, reset it, pull a power cord, whatever, 10 seconds later, the unit comes back up and everything's just fine, like it had never been disconnected. Motu, like when you're using it with virtual instruments or other software, the drivers just suck, and there's no two ways around it. So do yourself a favor. Even though Motu is respected, they talk great game, and you know, some of their products do work, I do think that there are other products out there in the market in the same price range, or actually for less, new, which are superior, certainly with better drivers. If this interface was really cheap, the less than stellar audio quality would be forgivable, but for the price that you'll pay for one of these, especially new, no, I wouldn't touch it. And the fact that the drivers are finicky and painful to deal with and flaky, it's just not worth it. Let's talk about the audio mix software that's included with the Motu. Basically, the short version is it's a mess. It's hard to understand, it's hard to figure out, and it's not terribly versatile. A big limitation of the Motu hardware is the DSP. They want to talk about the DSP and the mixer and that you can do all these effects, and that's great. It will do that, but under certain circumstances, like when applying a compression, an EQ onto 2 or 3 channels, particularly on the output of the 3 different tabs in the software, you'll very quickly find that the DSP just maxes out really quickly. It's very disappointing because the way they talk about this, you'd expect that you'd be able to apply basically 2 or 3 effects onto everything coming in and out, and it would just work. And you know what? With another audio interface that I have, you actually can do that. You can apply effects to all the inputs, use all the effects, and you know what? You don't run out of DSP. It just works. So the real limitations in the DSP processing in this unit are really disappointing. I mean, you can get away with it. I think it tends to use less resources when you apply the effects on the inputs, but when you apply them on the output channels, it really kind of maxes everything out. Another frustrating limitation of this unit is it's very difficult to route all the inputs and outputs the way you'd necessarily like. Sure, you can set main output to 1, 2 or whatever outputs, but when you start wanting to do a little bit more sophisticated things like, say, have aux sends going to all those extra outputs that you're not using to go to an outboard effects unit and then bring it back in, yeah, good luck with that. It's not a very intuitive or easy thing to set up. One of the problems that I had with the whole Motu setup is day to day, I'd set it up on one day, shut everything off, come back the next day, no sound coming out. I'd have to go reconfigure everything. I mean, that's just not acceptable in this day and age. So that's it. This is just not a unit that I'm going to recommend because of the limitations in the drivers, the software, the DSP, the crashing, just a whole host of things that just don't work well. And when there are other units out there with good software, better sound quality, in the same price range or actually cheaper, I can't see why you'd want to buy one of these. Sorry. The drivers were a big part of the reason I actually pulled this out of my system. That's right, I'm giving this product a negative review.